Welcome, everyone. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On YouTube, subscribe to @Grade Level Reading. On Facebook and Instagram, like the page Campaign for GLR. And on Twitter or X, follow us @Reading by Third. On LinkedIn, we're also Campaign for GLR. Once again, welcome everyone. My name is Leah Cruz, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce the conversation today. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but it helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build our CGLR community, and connect with people who are feeling the way that we're all feeling. I do have just a few housekeeping tips to go over before we get started. First of all, you're in listen only mode as audience, but we would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat, and a lot of people already are, so thank you. We'd love to know who's here. Share your city, state, your organization, however you want to identify yourself, and then be sure to select everyone so we know who's here. All attendees are encouraged to interact with our panelists through the Q&A box. So if you have a question during the webinar, please put it in the Q&A box. We'll make sure we answer it. The chat is great for comments and discussion, but we want to make sure questions go in that Q&A. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording, the slides, the bios for our panelists, and all of the resources that we'll talk about during the session will be sent to anyone who's registered on Friday of this week. So they'll be linked in the chat during real time during the session, but any resources you might miss will come to you in an email. You will get access to those. And then lastly, the last thing I have for the housekeeping tips is there will be a brief survey that pops up about 10 minutes before the end of the session. We really encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And then real quick, we have some upcoming sessions we wanted to make you aware of. So this afternoon, actually, we have the Foundation of EdTech is Connection, ensuring universal access to the internet. That is with Amina Fazlullah of Common Sense Media. This is a really, really great session. We're going to be talking about digital connectivity and how the internet is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity for kids to succeed in school, and how we are going to bridge that digital divide that keeps widening. We have a Crucible of Practice next week on the 10th, and that is about accelerating work in rural communities, the things that are working there. We have More Hopeful Futures or Children as Collateral Damage. There's a typo. And that next week as well, at 3 o'clock next week, and that's going to be about SNAP benefits and sort of all the things that SNAP does and why it's important and how we're going to protect it. And then we'll have a funder to funder on the 17th. Set Ready to Learn, philanthropic support for children's multimedia programming. That is going to be a really great session too, featuring some new shows and some PBS things. And with that, I will turn it over to Sierra Sanchez. She is a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and producer and session lead and all around Renaissance woman. So Sierra.
What an introduction. Thank you, Leah. And thank you everyone for joining us and being with us in the room today. It's so great to see all of the introductions that are already happening in the chat. I'm really, really thankful for everyone who can be in the room with us today as we embark on this very important topic with starting strong, preparing children and families for kindergarten success. As evidenced throughout our Kindergarten Matters series so far, we at CGLR believe that a strong kindergarten entry can be one of the most powerful starting points for success for children and families. Yet too often, that readiness gets placed solely on families and students, without recognizing this role that schools, communities, and systems must play in ensuring that every child is truly set up to thrive. Today's conversation will surface ways to take that pressure off of families by reimagining how we prepare for the kindergarten year. From expanding summer bridge supports and health screenings to strengthening communication, relationships, and cross-system coordination. And I'm incredibly thankful that we are able to hear from so many different experts in today's conversation. We're hearing from policy and health experts, as well as on the ground and lived experts who are speaking to the work that is taking place in their communities. And with that, I don't want to take up too much time. I'm excited to jump into the conversation. So I will be sharing some brief bios of our panelists, but keep in mind that full bios have been linked in the chat, and I will share them again as soon as I'm done here. Jennifer Andrews is the Director of Early Childhood Strategies for Chattanooga 2.0 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She leads work to improve child outcomes through systems coordination and alignment across the early childhood sectors of health, learning, and family supports. Deidre DeGier is President and CEO of Oak Ridge Neighborhood and leads Iowa's largest affordable housing complex dedicated to enriching diverse communities through exceptional housing and inclusive support services. David Jacobson, a familiar face on these CGLR webinars, is the director of EDC's First 10 initiative, which supports a national network of early childhood and community partnerships that is working to improve outcomes for children and their families. He brings deep experience in early childhood education, school improvement, applied research, and strategic planning. Nadra Rizkala serves as the Federal Programs and Early Learning Leader for Eugene School District 4J, where she drives efforts to build equitable, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive systems in federally funded and early learning programs. Also from Eugene School District 4J is Greta Segola. She is District Early Learning Coordinator, where she supports the district's kindergarten transitions and alignment planning, working to support enrollment efforts, family-centered orientation events and resources, KIT summer programming for transitioning kindergartners and their caregivers, and supporting teachers in aligning the start of kindergarten. And Heidi Shoemaker is a general pediatrician and assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine. In this role, she serves as faculty for the Vermont Child Health Improvement Program, a statewide initiative that integrates public health, clinical quality improvement, and health services research. And if that, I just saw someone say fabulous panel. If it wasn't fabulous enough already, I'm even more excited to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, Swati Adarkar. Swati is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Policy and Early Learning at the U.S. Department of Education. Swati led the department's early learning initiatives, including Kindergarten Sturdy Bridge, and continues to be a very key thought partner with the campaign for grade level reading. And with that, I'm excited to turn first to Swati to get us started. And Swati, as we get ready to jump in, I'd love to just ask you a question as we gear up. I'd love to hear from your perspective on why the transition to kindergarten is such a pivotal moment for children and families, and what we all should keep in mind when thinking about how to better support kids as they take this first big step into school. So I'd love to hear from you first.
Thank you, Sierra, first for that very generous introduction. And a big thank you to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for this really steadfast work you all do every week to center the needs of young learners and families, particularly those who are economically challenged. As Sierra said, I had the pleasure of leading the early learning work for the 2.5 years at the U.S. Department of Education under the Biden administration, and was truly grateful for the partnership and collaboration, both the campaign and many of you who are on this Zoom call today, for elevating the importance of the kindergarten year and including the transition before kindergarten and the transition into first grade. We know that these are foundational to early school success. We know it's truly a formative window in a child's learning and development journey when our programs, services, and supports are neither well-resourced nor aligned. And that's why we must continue to focus on building a sturdy bridge between the early years and early grades. When we do this, our students can experience early school success and meet those important grade level reading milestones in third grade in both reading and math. Sierra is going to share the final report we issued that includes the messaging slides in the chat. And I was pleased and a bit surprised to find out that many of those links are still live on the U.S. Department of Education website, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you all. You know, I've spent a long time, many years being a preschool advocate, and there were many occasions where my colleagues and I, not intentionally, but we just didn't realize we were under attending to the connections that must be forged after preschool to really make sure those early investments pay off. The transition into kindergarten is one of those essential building block steps to develop the continuity of supports, services, instruction, relationships, and data sharing to create a seamless early learning path from birth through third grade. Kindergarten teachers truly have an incredibly challenging assignments. They rarely have the full array of supports and tools they need to meet the diverse needs of their incoming students. We unfortunately do not yet treat kindergarten as the first universal, scaled early learning opportunity to reach every single child and put them on the path to early school success. One of my heroes, Marian Wright Edelman, who was the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, called kindergarten the missing step. She certainly was right. Children are arriving from a wide array of settings that are voluntary, parent choice, of varying quality from home environments to formal programs. And we know that children naturally develop at different rates and therefore have a range of developmental and linguistic strengths, learning differences, delays, and disabilities. And often, unfortunately, children begin their kindergarten year with undetected physical and behavioral health challenges. Attending to these important development needs and milestones underscores the importance of the kindergarten transition window as a time to forge those relationships between parents, early educators, and kindergarten teachers. Parents can understandably feel overwhelmed as they bring their young children to a new school, often for the first time. They have questions and concerns for how their child will be supported and how they can be engaged in their child's learning. It's a time of mixed emotions, anticipation, excitement, confusion, fear, and uncertainty, particularly now. This makes forging those relationships, both across settings and sectors, ever more critical. With the off-the-chart kindergarten chronic absence rates that certainly worsened dramatically during the pandemic, the transition to kindergarten is an ideal window to help establish the partnerships with parents and families to develop the routines, relationships, and habits that will serve children and families for their educational experience well beyond kindergarten. Let's remind ourselves that the kindergarten period is an important inflection point. It's predictive of later school success. Why? Because the achievement gap at the beginning of kindergarten entry grows during the kindergarten year, particularly for economically challenged students. And that cumulative gap persists into and through the early grades. This makes early school success far out of reach for far too many students. Moreover, we know this period of learning and development can be transformed into a sturdy bridge that ensures early school success, and that's what today's session is about. We're going to hear from several inspiring folks who are doing terrific work on the ground to support innovation and effective practices for kindergarten transition. You'll hear about the collaborative efforts and partnerships focused on healthy development, developmentally informed learning, supporting parents, cross-sector professional development, continuity, and everyday attendance. Let's dive into the conversation and welcome our panelists now. David, looking forward to chatting with you. Can you help us ground today's conversation by giving us an overview of what First 10 is and the core principles behind it?
Thank you, Swati. It's wonderful to be here. Great to be here with you. And thanks to Sierra and Sarah and Ralph Smith and their colleagues at the campaign for organizing today's session. And I'm really looking forward to learning from the panel and from the chat conversation with all of you in the audience. So, First 10 is an approach to school community partnerships focused on children and families. First 10 is an initiative of the Education Development Center, EDC, and EDC is a mission driven nonprofit focused on education, health, and expanding economic opportunity. So, First 10 partnerships bring together elementary schools and early childhood programs and health and social services to improve coordination and alignment, and this is important to implement joint strategies that help improve teaching and learning in classrooms and that support children and families. We've implemented First 10 in more than 50 communities in 6 states, and we do this by creating First 10 zones and First 10 school hubs. So a First 10 zone includes multiple elementary schools and all the early childhood programs within that zone. So think a small district or a large neighborhood or a town within a district. And First 10 hubs are single elementary schools that partner with the early childhood programs in the school's catchment area and then support families and link them to health and social services. And the goal of these partnerships, as you see in the center of this slide, is that all children learn and thrive. First 10 partnerships implement 3 broad strategies: collaborate to improve teaching and learning, coordinate comprehensive services, and deepen partnerships with families in culturally responsive ways. And each partnership is supported by a senior First 10 team facilitator, a member of the First 10 team at EDC. We begin the process by looking at assets and needs, the work currently underway. We develop a focus plan, and that plan typically includes a number of starter practices that fall under the 3 core strategies that you see on the left. And these starter practices are very relevant to our conversation today. They include comprehensive transition to kindergarten plans. So every First 10 community develops a comprehensive transition to kindergarten plan, a plan that actually gets implemented. Our communities also implement what we call school-connected play and learns. These are a great way to bring together children and families, to connect them to services, do fun activities, and to make that connection between the families and the schools really early. And most of our communities implement a community-wide parenting campaign, another one of our starter practices. And most of our communities use the basics, and Jennifer in a little bit will be on our panel, will be talking about the basics in Chattanooga. And so what's been really helpful about these starter practices is that they get the partners collaborating on concrete activities that are good for children and families. The partnerships experience success, and successful implementation builds the partnership.
David, that comprehensive overview is really helpful. Thank you. You've led efforts to align early childhood and K-12 through this First 10 approach that you described. What are some of the most effective ways that communities can support that key kindergarten transition, especially when families experience fragmented services?
Sure, Swati. So after First 10 partnerships develop their plans, they typically break into 2 work groups: a transition to kindergarten work group and a family partnership work group. So the first step for communities that want to implement a transition to kindergarten plan is to convene a transition to kindergarten team. And the size of that team is relative to the size of the community. So a small community would convene a transition to kindergarten team that includes a district leader, a school leader, community-based administrator, a Head Start administrator, a couple of pre-K teachers, a couple of kindergarten teachers, maybe a children's librarian, a family representative. And a larger community would then have more representatives from those categories. And then I think it's really important when we think about the transition to kindergarten that, yes, absolutely, we work to support children and families directly through our programming. And we also bring together elementary schools and early childhood programs and libraries to work together, aligning practices, aligning routines, terminology, language, crosswalking standards and curriculum, thinking about instructional strategies, in effect, creating a community of practice, learning from each other. And that's an important part of improving teaching and learning through the transition to kindergarten. If anyone would like a quick summary of the approach I'm describing, we worked with 8 state agencies in Alabama to support the development of the Alabama Transition to Kindergarten Toolkit. And I recommend section 2 of that toolkit for a quick introduction to this approach. It's just 4.5 pages kind of laid out for you there. And so what I thought I would do now is share some examples of some great transition to kindergarten strategies and practices. And I'll start with supports for children and families. So next slide, please. And so here you see in this next slide, the Conestoga Valley is a community, a First 10 community in Pennsylvania. And here in this slide, you see how Conestoga Valley has tied First 10 and their transition to kindergarten work directly to their district improvement plan and their profile of a Conestoga Valley learner, which is the district's North Star. And one of the things that First 10 communities do is really expand the notion of kindergarten orientation. I sometimes refer to this as kindergarten orientation on steroids. So next slide, please. And so on the left of this slide, you see an organizing tool that all of our communities use to organize their First 10 activities. On the right, you see a flyer about play and learns for children ages 3 to 5. And I'll draw your attention to the middle. Conestoga Valley previously had a variety of transition to kindergarten events. And it wasn't entirely clear to families what they all were, how they differed, and there wasn't consistency around these events across the elementary schools in the district. So the First 10 team created the Kindergarten Express. And this graphic goes with a flyer that includes descriptions of each stop on the Kindergarten Express. And so you can see that this is an organized, planful way to support children and families over the course of several months leading up to the fall. And then in the next slide, you'll see a variation. And so our communities come together monthly in a First 10 network. And one thing that's been exciting for us in the last couple of years is to see ideas that developed in one community spread to other communities. So here you see that Sanford, Maine borrowed Conestoga Valley's Kindergarten Express with ample attribution, of course. And on the left, you see hiking the trail to kindergarten. And so Sanford has a lot of nearby hiking trails, and you see all the great stops that Sanford has on its hiking the kindergarten trail. And then in the middle, you see Sanford's First 10 books for 4-year-olds. All of our First 10 communities create a top 10 list of books for 4-year-olds and share that with all the teachers of 4 and 5-year-olds. So those are some examples of direct support for families. And as I mentioned, we've found that it's also critically important that we bring together pre-K and early elementary educators for joint professional learning. And in this next slide, you'll see a visual that's actually from Sanford, Maine, but I'd like to briefly take us down to Alabama. So Russellville, Alabama is in the northwest corner. It's a rural community in the northwest corner of Alabama. And there we did, when we did our first joint professional learning activity there, we looked at standards, we discussed challenges and effective teaching strategies and how we could have better align pre-K and K. And everyone in the room was so excited. The room was buzzing at the end. And this, by the way, is a pre-K to 2nd grade school with a 3 to 5 elementary school right across the parking lot. And after that first event, the principal said to me, you know, we always bring together our 2nd and 3rd grade teachers for transition discussions, but it never occurred to us to bring together our pre-K and kindergarten teachers. And we find that this is a very typical state of affairs. Often we find this even when pre-K and K are within the same school buildings, and certainly between schools and community-based early childhood programs. So Russellville ended up setting up regular joint professional learning opportunities and cross-site visits where pre-K and K teachers got to visit each other's classrooms. And so you see in this great photo one of Sanford's joint professional learning activities. They're also doing pre-K and K cross-site visits. I'll mention that another community, York, Pennsylvania, has actually pushed this up and is including 1st and 2nd grade in these joint professional learning opportunities. And then these can then lead to more ambitious curriculum alignment efforts. West Warwick, Rhode Island adopted the same social emotional learning program across community-based providers in the district Johnson, Rhode Island has done this with a phonological awareness resource. And York, Pennsylvania has done this with high quality math games called the Young Mathematicians Initiative. And we shared York's experience and the games in a campaign webinar on May 6th. So what I'd like to wrap up now with two communities in Virginia that have just done some great work this past year, Newton Lee Elementary and Sugarland Elementary. And what I want to emphasize about both of these Virginia schools and what we aim for in First 10 is the emphasis that they put on developing positive relationships with families. So this slide from Sugarland Elementary captures some of that. This is a Title I school. Everything is translated. Interpreters are present at family events. You see on the right that they do kindergarten home visits towards the end of the summer. And the overarching philosophy here is around relationship building and building trust with families. At a recent Pastries with Parents that they do monthly at Sugarland, 85 family members showed up. They include a 15-minute presentation. They have interpreters, and to get that kind of response is a real testament to the relationships that they've built. So my colleague, Jenny Portillo-Naku, just wrote a blog post on Sugarland's approach to the idea of schools as trusted spaces. Sierra will put that in the chat. And this attitude and this philosophy really underlies all the strategies I've shared today and is a key aspect of making them successful.
David, I'm sure others will join me in really appreciating how you could take concepts like alignment and make them really concrete at the level of practice. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to welcome Heidi into this conversation. And Heidi, it's great to see you again virtually
Good
and
to see you too.
reconnect on this body of work that we've been working on. You've done so much I've known in your work prior, and you continue to look at how health and learning are inseparable, which is such an important concept for us to hold. And be great if you could share some of the most critical but often overlooked health supports to help families on that journey to be really ready for kindergarten.
Thank you so much, Swati. We can go to the next slide. So I'm a pediatrician, but I've worked in schools and with schools and childcare for a number of years now. And I'm just so grateful to be part of this conversation because I feel like health, as we know, is really central to so much of kids' readiness for success in kindergarten and beyond. So this concept of kindergarten readiness, I think, as you've already started to hear, I think many folks think about it in the preschool age, but the truth is all of a child's early experiences in all settings are educational, right? So it's not just about pre-academic skills, of course, but physical well-being, social emotional abilities, self-regulation, language, cognition, those are all skills that start from birth and that are essential for children to be ready for kindergarten. So as a pediatrician, I often say to families of young infants and toddlers, when they read to their baby, when they sing to their baby, they are their child's first teacher. And those skills that they're learning and that experience of being read to and sung to, that is kindergarten readiness. That's teaching socialization, emotional regulation on the playground, etc. All of that is essential to prepare children for kindergarten. But we also have to make sure, if we go to the next slide, that children's and families' health is attended to. As that we used to say in a team of school health and childcare health folks in DC that I led, healthy bodies and minds are the foundations of academic success. And we know this to be true probably in our personal lives too, that for kids, health and academic readiness are two sides of the same coin. And this is true in my mind, not only for the health of that child, but also for the health of their family. That when that child and their family is well, when their basic needs are met, they're more likely to be ready for school. Conversely, if that child or a family member has an unmet physical or mental health concern, that may introduce more struggles in that child being ready for kindergarten. Then if we go to the next slide, this is just a different way to sort of visualize that really tri-directional relationship. Health and educational outcomes very closely interwoven, really with social factors really undergirding many of those considerations. And I think you've already started, I've already been talking about, if we go to the next slide, animation, this direction, right? Health and education, health and social factors predicting educational outcomes. And the healthcare space has really started to pick up on this. If we go to the next slide, even the National Academy of Medicine identifying that school readiness can be is so inextricably linked to health and social factors that we should consider it a vital sign, right? As a pediatrician, I look at something like fever, or any parent in the audience, you hear a fever and you think, oh, maybe that child has an infection, inflammation somewhere. I'm going to identify and treat the fever, but also like dig in and see what might be causing it. And we're really increasingly as a field thinking about school readiness being indicative of underlying health and social factors underneath the core. And we're ready really as the healthcare partners and as articulated even in policy from the American Academy of Pediatrics, that we really have to be part of the solution, walking hand in hand with you all in the childcare and school spaces to be working together in service of families.
We know that that connection between health and learning can have implications for attendance, and that health and attendance are also deeply interconnected. When children don't have the access to routine care, screenings, treatment, they're often more likely to miss school, particularly in those early years. From your perspective, what are some of the key health-related factors that impact both kindergarten attendance and readiness?
It's a great question, Swati. Thank you for this. I mean, I think foundationally, again, healthy bodies and minds are the foundations of academic success, beginning at the earliest ages. And so when I think about health and health care, I really think, I know this is a busy slide, but the regular parts of preventive healthcare, screening for psychosocial risks, developmental screening, which we do regularly in pediatric primary care, identifying and treating physical health conditions, providing routine immunizations. When children and families are well connected to healthcare, routine preventative healthcare, including these regular components, they're more likely to attend school. They're more likely to be ready to learn and to be successful in that. And if we go to the next slide, we know that this matters. These trends in kindergarten, as you've already heard from Swati and David, matter because those trends in kindergartens can really last a lifetime. So these are just two examples of studies looking at children at age 5 who are ready for kindergarten, predicting really a generation of their academic success. So success in kindergarten and readiness in kindergarten, predicting third grade reading, middle school academic scores, on-time graduation. And if we go to the next slide, a lot of that is overlaid with attendance. So as Swati just indicated, there's really good data that demonstrates when young people attend school regularly, beginning in kindergarten, are engaged, their families are engaged as part of the community, just like you heard from David. We know that those young people are more likely to be regularly attending school and succeeding by third grade and beyond. So those early engagements with families to help people understand success in kindergarten and regularly attending kindergarten isn't just a like, if you can do it, come when you can. It's really an essential sort of foundation to be setting with families. And this matters, one last slide, because we know when we can keep kids attending school regularly, succeeding in their education, that matters not only for their intellect and their sort of cognition, but because we know success in academics, graduating from high school, et cetera, is one of the leading predictors of people's long-term health and their social well-being. And so that matters very much to me as a pediatrician in setting young people up for success in their long-term life.
Heidi, what do we do to make sure these kind of screenings and referrals that that you shared as part of our preventive strategies are part of a system and ongoing supports and partnerships with schools and not just one-time events?
I love that. I mean, I think these are just some examples of ways I think we can all partner together across sectors, is schools, childcare, pediatric or family medicine homes, public health colleagues. We can all work together, as Swati just indicated, at the systems level through coordinating care for individual kids and families, sharing data with appropriate consent, And I think these bottom two are almost maybe the most important. We can advocate together. I've long had this dream of like, we're all child serving sectors. Couldn't we all advocate for our one another's shared priorities? We as pediatricians and health folks advocate for funding for childcare and schools and vice versa, and joint messaging too. So families are hearing the same messages about the importance of kindergarten readiness, resources that are available, et cetera, from both child and educational sectors that they may be served by. So if you're working in the child care or school setting and you're not already partnering with the healthcare folks in your community, would really encourage you to reach out and wonder if maybe even just a shared huddle, just to wonder about opportunities might be possible. And every state has a chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So if you don't know where to get started, you can always just Google AAP chapter in your state, and that's a good place to start.
Thanks for making the importance of cross-sector partnerships so real and concrete. Let's now shift to the community level and move our conversation there. As Sierra mentioned at the top of the webinar, we're incredibly lucky to be able to dig into this topic with 3 different communities across the US. Before we dig in, I'm hoping our panelists can provide a bit of context and background into what communities they're representing and ground us in the work they're doing and give us an overview. Deirdre, let's start with you. Can you tell us about the Oak Ridge neighborhood? We'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Swati, and welcome to everyone on the call. I have the fortunate opportunity of leading the largest affordable housing organization in the state of Iowa. We were founded in the 1960s, and if many of you all are familiar with public housing organizations and entities, I think at that time we were calling them projects. So many of them were being established across the country, Oak Ridge being one of them. I have personally some great connections with these organizations as I grew up amongst them with family members in them. And when you think about all of those different housing organizations like Cabrini Green in Chicago and Magnolia Projects and in Louisiana, so many of them are no longer in existence. And Oak Ridge is, and I attribute a large part of Oak Ridge being still in existence because of its insistence on meeting the needs of people. You know, at Oak Ridge, we offer a number of different services. I'm doing my own little slide today. Housing is the only service that we offer only to our residents. We also offer workforce development. We offer after school and out of school programming. And to the topic today, we have an on-site early childhood education center that starts with 6 weeks and goes all the way up to universal pre-K. Now, these things weren't established last week. These things weren't established when wraparound services became a thing. These things were established in the early 70s when the founders of the organization realized that having a home was not simply enough, that we needed to create a pathway, a strong pathway to ensure that individuals had access to long-term sustainability options. And that is what we continue to do here within this organization. Nearly 50% of the people we serve are refugees and immigrants. We have more than 17 anchors and nearly 1,000 residents on campus. But the most unique thing about our service is that it's not just about our residents, it's about building a community. And so all of our services are open and welcome to anyone, which what in the long term, what it does is give our students access to a full throttle community that they may see on a regular everyday basis, but also folks that they wouldn't see on a regular everyday basis. As I mentioned, we service our students from 6 weeks all the way up to pre-K. And right now, as many of you all know, there are a lot of opportunities for growth in early childhood education. And what we're leaning into right now is continuing to build a pathway for folks who want to work in early childhood education to ensure that there are spaces available for them. That is one of our limitations as an organization, in that we want to serve more children, which means we have to create pathways for people to actually work in this industry. Oak Ridge is going to be around for another 60 years, but those are just the top lines of the work that we do. It's not simply enough to offer one service to our folks. We are literally wrapping our hands around individuals so that they are set up for success. More than 20 languages are spoken on our campus, and we have staff that can also speak those languages as well, which then helps bridge a gap and mitigate a barrier of language in that pathway to sustainability. Hopefully, Swati, that was 3 minutes. That's what I've got for now.
That was a terrific overview on community building. Thank you so much. Let's invite Jennifer into this conversation. And Jennifer, it would be great to hear about Chattanooga 2.0 in Tennessee. We'd love to hear what you're doing there.
Thanks, Swati. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here representing Hamilton County in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is located, as you can see on the map there, in southeast Tennessee. In our county, we have about 25,000 children under the age of 6, just to kind of set the stage. And in our county, we have one school district and a very diverse geography. And my organization is called Chattanooga 2.0, and it's the Birth to Career backbone organization for the county. And we have been working with community organizations for 10 years towards economic prosperity for residents. And we believe that education and career access are the first step to attaining that. And so while we do a lot of work to support and uplift the entire birth to career continuum, we're a small team. So we focus our work on 3 big bets that will help us achieve that community vision. Those are early childhood literacy and viable pathways, which are career pathways that lead to thriving wage jobs for young people out of high school. So our team really stands in those spaces where there are not systems coordinators for children and families, and we bring community partners together out of silos to tackle systems level barriers. And one of the ways that we do that is that we collect and analyze data related to those 3 big bets. And this includes an early childhood survey that we have now administered twice for parents with children under the age of 5. And when it comes to working collaboratively in Chattanooga, we do that through our volunteer action teams. Early Matters is our action team with over 40 organizations in the county, and they are all invested in the well-being of children. And they have been meeting for 9 years to establish collaborative relationships across sectors and preventing silos in that childhood space. And once children get to kindergarten, our backbone also facilitates the Out of School Time Alliance for aftercare and summer care programs. And so today I'm going to be talking about in Tennessee, we don't have a state definition of kindergarten readiness, nor is there a consistent or required kindergarten entrance assessment for kindergartners when they get there. So in 2023, in partnership with the county and the school district, local child care providers, kindergarten teachers, health providers, and many other community stakeholders, we created a locally aligned definition for K-Ready, supported by resources like skills lists, activity booklets, videos for skill building, and most recently, video interviews with kindergarten teachers designed to help families more easily transition to kindergarten.
Thanks so much for that overview. Really appreciated it. Now we're going to go virtual travel to the West Coast and invite our 2 Oregon panelists to join us. Greta and Nadra, we would love to hear from you about your efforts in Eugene District 4J.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and for the opportunity to speak to you. My colleague Greta and I are from the Eugene School District 4J. We serve over 16,000 students in Oregon. We have 19 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, and 4 high schools, in addition to 6 weeks to pre-K programs and young parent childcare services. We offer a variety of educational programs, including language immersion, alternative schools, and career and technical education pathways. Our school communities value autonomy, and it's a long-standing practice. Although our district prioritizes inclusive practices to ensure every child has access to high-quality education, sometimes autonomy clashes with alignment in the process of change, and today we will share with you how we responded to that. On the next slide here, one way we responded is through devising our kindergarten transition and alignment plan, which had centered the purpose of creating a cohesive vision and language around the early learning transition. We collectively share a goal of every child experiences a positive, equitable, and developmentally appropriate transition into kindergarten, one that nurtures belonging, engagement, and readiness to learn. These are the transition and alignment elements that we focused on. We are going to be diving a little more in depth with these in our next section, and my colleague Greta is going to zoom in and talk particularly about some of these elements in depth. Here, I included a summary of our KTAB for those of you who are interested to look later at the stages and components of the transition. Also, we will cover some of that later. One of the major levers we focused on a systemic level is the idea of our sphere of influence. As educators, we often face challenges that can feel overwhelming, from district policies and student home environment to limited time and shifting standards. This visual reminded us to focus our energy where it will make the biggest difference. At the center, we stayed with what we can control: our instruction, our planning, how we build relationships with students, how we manage our classroom, and how we respond to students day to day. Then we turned to what we can influence: our school culture, how we collaborate with colleagues, the supports we advocate for, and even how we model expectations for families. Beyond that, everything else that we, chose not to focus on through this plan because it created noise and made our teams feel overwhelmed with the the many things that were thrown at them. So we really focused our effort in the two inner circles. Later on in our conversation, we will go over some shifts we had to make and some specific activities we did to help achieve our goal.
Thanks so much. It was really helpful to hear that both the context and the conditions for making this work successful. Jennifer, let's now come back to you to get a little deeper in understanding the work you're doing. You've talked about the importance of meeting families where they are, whether it's through libraries, children's museums, or trusted community spaces. Can you share more about that and what's happening in Chattanooga 2.0 to leverage these informal supports so that you're reaching families early and building that critical trust?
Absolutely. So in 2021, Early Matters began the research required to create an early child action plan, is what we call it. And it was a part of the Bright Start Tennessee network. And for our plan, we paired publicly available data with family provided context to hone in on a group of evidence-based strategies across health, learning, and family support sectors. And it was our intention that these would impact kindergarten readiness and 3rd through 5th grade literacy and math proficiency. And during our research and community feedback gathering, we learned that families and childcare teachers both felt unsure and uneasy about the transition to kindergarten. And they expressed this lack of clarity around the expectations and the skills that children would need to get to kindergarten. And excuse me, additionally, families requested support and recommended activities that they could do to give their child the strongest start in kindergarten. So we began the Ready, Set, Kindergarten campaign. And if you would go to the next slide. And what we did is bring partners together to establish some common language around kindergarten, because as I said earlier, our state does not offer that definition of kindergarten readiness. And then we advocated for a consistent year-over-year kindergarten entrance measurement at the school district. So if you would go to the next slide, as you'll be able to see in our promotional materials, we attempted to both give parents the resource that they asked for, but then also not scare off parents who didn't ask for this. The definition is about community and how we all have a role to play in early childhood. So for caregivers, it's designed as a support, not a pressure. And in our materials across the website and in all of our print materials, we include language to assure parents. It says, kindergarten teachers will be ready for your little one no matter what. If you go to the next slide. So once we had the definition and the common language, we moved on to resources. So in partnership with kindergarten teachers and early childhood development experts, we created materials that went out to every public pre-K classroom and every private child care provider in the county. Most of the child care pre-K teachers expressed appreciation for the materials because they told us they had never been given the opportunity to hear directly from kindergarten teachers. And our resources were shared by all of the Early Matters Action Team partner organizations, including our Children's Museum and the public library. The library put posters of the kindergarten skills around during their children's programs. And when the librarians would cover a skill, they would point to the poster and they would reinforce that this fun writing game we just did is actually building your skills for kindergarten. And the parents of children at the library said that they were finally starting to see how everyday conversations and activities were really building their child's skills for kindergarten. Another way that we utilized trusted resources in the community is through our Children's Museum. They have long been a champion of kindergarten ready work, and they went as far as adding signs throughout the museum to label for parents what sort of kindergarten skills children were building when they played with a particular exhibit, because as we know, play is learning. Next slide, please. So we partnered with our Early Matters member organizations, including PBS, teaching artists employed by our local college, and we created videos with easy activities that parents could do to build K skills at home. So on the left there, you see some of the activity videos. We also partnered with our Latino family serving organization to create Spanish videos. Videos in Spanish in partnership with the local Children's Museum and a local Spanish-speaking pediatrician. The second video campaign that we did you'll see there on the right, has been wholly focused on transition supports for families. We wanted to ensure that parents had answers to common questions starting kindergarten, like what are my kids actually going to learn, and will my child still get to play? And then more logistical questions such as, how does my child catch the bus? Or you said that my child needs a vision checkup. How do I do that if I'm in 10 care? So trying to put out a Kindergarten 101 series of videos. And if you need to pick me up, the day in the life of a kindergartner video that follows around 6 kindergartners from our county is just absolutely precious. Next slide. This year, we also partnered with the school district to pilot early childhood events with community partners who came out to an elementary school to run activity tables and gave parents easy ideas for how to build kindergarten skills at home. The children and the families also get to go in and meet the kindergarten teacher and tour the school. Because this is new for us in Hamilton County and not yet common throughout the school district, we're creating templates for elementary schools to host similar events on their own. And the next slide. Lastly, the kindergarten campaign is about community, and we all know, as Heidi said, that parents are their child's first teachers. So in Hamilton County, we utilize a program that the city runs called the Basics Chattanooga, and it's 5 principles from birth to age 3 that any adult can give to a child to boost brain development. So maximize love, manage stress, talk, sing, and point, count, group, and compare. And so these have been around for a while in the community, and the Ready Set Kindergarten campaign is geared towards rising kindergarten students. And so what we did was create a crosswalk. On the next slide, you can see we made sure that no matter the age a child was under the age of 5, there was something within each of those basics categories that a parent could do with their child. This way, we're ensuring that no matter the age, a community partner would be able to share a quick, simple skill building tip with caregivers.
I'm sure people are going to really benefit from these resources. Can you say a little bit more about how you're working with community partners to take a place-based approach to this work?
Sure. Definitely. So there's been this long-standing assumption in our county that all learning is the responsibility of the K-12 schools. So some of our work around K-Ready has actually been to shift mental models. Early childhood and family serving organizations have been focused on coming together to wrap around families in our community to really support that journey to kindergarten, because we locally have had to make the case that early childhood is important for school and life success. It's not always been a given in our county. So we've spent years building positive relationships with our countywide service agencies as well as our governmental leaders. But still, with our early childhood action plan, we tried to really narrow down the focus geographically, so as not to boil the ocean. The target areas for our work have been guided by a whole host of data like the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, SVI, and others. But we're particularly excited now to be able to use that baseline kindergarten entrance assessment that our school district will be implementing in the fall to really hone in on a neighborhood level target. So we'll use that as a baseline to also guide informal educators and shift our work. So the next step for our organization is really to go deep, neighborhood by neighborhood, to work with neighborhood level service partners, the neighborhood elementary school, and families to understand how to nurture that family's experience before kindergarten, because we've done a lot of work to earn the trust of our kind of grass tops and other community leaders. And we believe that now we'll have an easier time as we work to mitigate barriers for families at the neighborhood level.
Thanks, Jennifer. Let's build on that idea of meeting families where they are and where they live by inviting Deirdre back on into this conversation. Your work in Oak Ridge centers families, not just as participants, but also as leaders in shaping the supports available to them. What have you learned in terms of building trust with families during this critical transition period?
So I'll say the thing that we've learned the most, that I've learned the most in this process, is something that I didn't think I was going to learn. As I mentioned earlier, we offer 4 core services: housing, workforce development, early childhood education, and after school and out of school programming. Now, those are just a few buckets, but those buckets do not fulfill all of the needs of our families. I didn't mention behavioral health. I didn't mention healthcare. I didn't mention food. All of those things, plus so many more, come from our partners. A part of our ability to truly meet our families where they are is not only for us to dig deep into the services we know how to perform and facilitate on our campus, but it's also building trusted partnerships with individuals. You know, I think so often we get into these spaces where we feel like we have to do it all. And if we can't do it all, we're only going to do what we can do. And it's great that we can only do what we can do. But then there's another opportunity for us to bring in other folks who can do what they can do. And so we've been insistent on truly building partnerships with more than 50 organizations within our community to ensure that we're helping individuals beyond what our capability is as an organization. And that's not always easy. That's bringing folks to the fold that may not always be in perfect alignment with your mission, but they can add some value to it. And I'll tell you, when I first came in the organization, there was an opportunity to just do that. There were town hall meetings that were happening throughout our community, and people wanted to know how we could add value. And so we put together some stakeholders, specifically educators in our community. And these were educators that were at every level of the schools that meet the needs of our kids. So we're talking administrators, we're talking principals, we're talking teachers, success workers, put them all at the same table, K through 12, and we said, what are the needs of our students and how we can best supply those needs collectively in this group, in this room. And I'll tell you, over 7 to 8 months, we were meeting on a monthly basis. And as challenges arose, we collectively came up with solutions so that we were yet meeting the needs of our students. And one of those challenges came with getting more students enrolled in kindergarten. We were finding that our parents weren't necessarily as connected to the process as they could have been. And so we bridged those gaps to find more ways for our students to understand, or our families to understand, okay, this is the process of education. You know, these are families that likely weren't sending their students to a pre-K experience or any other early childhood experience. They were just in home, being taught or raised by a grandmother or a grandfather or something of that nature. And so we said, how can we go above and beyond and make sure that we're connecting students that aren't yet connected to our educational process and get them in? And so we started opening up registration opportunities for our families on site here. So that they could then acclimate themselves to the school experience after that. There were a number of other things that we were able to resolve in this table, but I'll tell you, did we always agree? No, we didn't. And I say was because we're taking a break for summertime. We'll be back up in August. But what we did do where we made sure we were insistent on trying to accomplish our goals with as it related to keeping our youth at the forefront of what we were trying to do.
Thank you for that great description on trust building and really listening to what families want and need. You mentioned August, and I'm so curious about this way in which you're sort of reimagining the calendar year for your efforts around kindergarten and looking at the whole year of August to August to make sure that kids don't lose ground over the summer. And I think many of us could benefit from learning more about how you took this approach on and what some of the positive outcomes are.
Yeah, so again, at that table, we were learning about not only students who weren't yet acclimated to our educational system, but those who were in already in the system, but still experiencing some setbacks. And what we found was that we were transitioning our kindergartners, well, soon to be kindergartners, the ones in our pre-K program, we were transitioning them in May. They would have a graduation just like everybody else was graduating. And then we put them into our summer program that didn't have as much structure as a classroom, but it's a summer program. It's where you learn a little bit and you have fun a little bit, but it doesn't have the structure that a classroom experience would have. And so we adopted to take our kindergartners, soon to be kindergartners, back into the classroom experience over the summer rather than giving them what some of our older youth really need, which is a little bit of a break. They needed more structure. And so for the first time this year, we're going to keep our soon to be kindergartners enrolled in our early Learning Academy, and they will have that opportunity to continue to learn so that come August, they'll get about a 1 week, 2 week break. Come August, they'll be ready to get back into a structured environment. And this is structure not only as it relates to education, but it's structure socially and behaviorally so that our students have the repetition of being activated in a classroom and getting well prepared for that. But we're excited to do that. And this year, some parents wanted their kids to graduate in May with all of the other ones, but we're going to wait. We're going to wait, and we think it's going to have long-term impact. The benefit that we have at Oak Ridge is that from 6 weeks all the way up to pre-K, our students have a registered teacher in their classroom that's teaching them with lesson plans. And so rather than just focus on just simply the childcare component, we're really leaning into the preparatory education necessary for our students' success.
Thank you so much for that description. I'm sure the parents are really benefiting from that kind of commitment and continuity, as well as the kids.
They are, and you know, the benefit that we told them, we know you wanted a May graduation, but now your kids will be graduating when no one else is, and they'll get all of the love and attention.
That's great. Nadra, let's invite you back to this conversation. You've been deeply involved in advancing this work, not just within the system, but by helping to shift how the system itself functions, especially by focusing on identity, relationships, and continuity, which are issues others have been raising in this conversation. For district leaders and educators who want to take actionable steps, what does it take to move this work from more isolated efforts to a shared vision of high-quality kindergarten?
Thank you, Swati. This is a really good question and is in the heart of the work that we did this year. So to answer this question, it would be helpful to highlight some levers we used to devise our kindergarten transition and alignment plan. More specifically, the idea of working in the system versus working on the system. So working in the system is the day-to-day supporting of teachers, parents, and staff. Working on the system is the real work on aligning structures, roles, and communication pathways that shape the systemic way we approach transitions. So in examining this approach, a shift about student readiness emerged on our early learning team that we then permeated throughout the organization. This simple but profound shift changed our thinking from asking, is this child ready for kindergarten, to, is our system ready for the child? Kids come to us with a range of skills and gaps, and the responsibility to fill them rests with us. This shift challenged us to focus on preparing the entire system to meet each child where they're at. So how did we do that, you might ask? First, through understanding that transitions for children aren't just a new classroom. They're not stepping into just a new classroom. They're really stepping into a new system of relationships, expectations, opportunities. It's a major life event for 5-year-olds. That's why our KTAP focused on bridges of belonging, that intentional effort to connect children and families to their new schools early on with care and trust. We planned at least 5 to 7 positive, trauma-informed spring touchpoints with families to build trust and alleviate anxiety. One of the most important items we needed to address is the fragmentation of our system due to the long history of site autonomy or school site autonomy. Families sometimes got mixed messages from different teams. It was hard to locate accurate information, leading to confusions or feeling excluded. In response, we developed a 3-pronged communication method. Us to the families, which is the conventional way, everybody does it. We give them information, clear, consistent, and supportive information. But then we also said, we want to hear from families, so families to us. We open pathways for feedback and relationship building, through, which Greta will cover some of that in a little bit here. And then families to each other through building opportunities for community and parent-to-parent connections and support. Another aspect of communication is stakeholder involvement. Communication means including all voices, as we all know, in shaping the plan. And so we involved our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, families, teachers, school leaders, and TOSAs. Everyone experienced feeling their voice heard in this plan so they can support it and get behind it. We also gave special attention to alignment with the broader district initiative. We all know transitions don't happen in isolation. We emphasized alignment with the broader district initiatives rather, and instructional practices. We did not want this to be an isolated plan. We wanted to build coherence and sustainability, avoiding initiative fatigue. Often teachers say, oh, one more thing to do. We don't have time. We are fatigued. We're tired. And so we wanted our teachers and our teams to look at this plan as a way of being rather than a one size fits all. So we identified also in terms of alignment and consistency, we identified tight or non-negotiables. We don't call them that in our district, but tight or loose or flexible components in our guidance in this plan. So no matter which schools are, implementing, we are ensuring consistency district-wide while allowing schools to adapt to local context, honoring that autonomy that they so much loved and prioritized historically. So all of the work that we've done, we filtered through an equity lens, ensuring inclusion and belonging and developmentally appropriate practices and early childhood and kindergarten standards that are not included in the Common Core. Our KTAP isn't a one-time fix, it's a journey of learning together. As we all know, systems change is complex and not always linear. So we're learning that readiness is about the system's capacity to adapt and learn, not about having all the answers correct from the first time. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague Greta to cover how we worked in the system and implemented on the ground some of the ideas I just shared.
Greta, it's great to have you join this conversation. And my mentor, Ruby Takanishi, used to talk about these two worlds of early learning and K-12 as different galaxies. And we know sometimes it can be hard to bring them together. And often, sometimes in the early childhood world, it feels like we're not getting a response from schools. And you guys have that benefit working in schools to help us understand what's really resonating and allowing schools to lean into this work. We'd love to hear.
Absolutely. You're right. The early learning community has long sought collaboration with districts in Eugene and more broadly in Lane County and Oregon. We do see this as part of our core mission. And as a former kinder teacher, this is the work I was always hoping to expand and now feel really privileged to have helped lead in our district for the past 9 years in my current role. We've learned that relationships are key. And I think Swati, you mentioned that, David mentioned that, but we began building those relationships by inviting early learning providers to district trainings, literally saving them a seat at the table. So through shared professional development and our early learning hub network, we've begun bridging early childhood and K-12 education. And so I'll just acknowledge that on this slide that you're seeing, there's a little bit of a transfer error in the formatting. So it does say NAEYC. We're referencing the National Association for the Education of Young Children, which will be familiar to many of the folks watching today. So we one of our key initiatives has been inviting our kinder teachers into preschool classrooms to observe developmentally appropriate play-based environments. And this helped us better understand children's experiences before they transitioned to kindergarten and elevated the work of our early learning partners. A shared foundation has been essential in Oregon. That means focusing on 3 key domains that Nadra alluded to: the approaches to learning, social emotional development, and language and communication. And these are outlined in the Oregon Early Learning and Kindergarten Guidelines. To root our work in strong research and equity, we use the NAEYC article that we felt really spoke to inclusive, developmentally appropriate practices from a P3, P8 lens. And with PD funding, we brought small groups of kinder teachers together to study these frameworks and observe local preschools. That couldn't have happened without relationships. So these experiences deepened understanding and shifted our approach from a top-down to really building up from preschool. We also joined the Children's Institute's Early School Success Academy, bringing together a diverse district team. And in year 1, we networked, we refined our goals around alignment and transitions, and really benefited from coaching to help us focus, start small, and test before scaling. And we really learned that sometimes you do need to go slow to go fast, despite the vast work you see in front of you. So on the next slide, we outline kind of what the work is that we engaged in. We're now finishing up year 2 with the Early School Success Academy and have taken real action to improve our transitions. Above all else, centering families, building trust, beginning with that first point of contact. Kindergarten is the only place families are expected to drop off their child while possibly having no relationship with the adults caring for them. I know this to be true because I'm about to do it as a parent myself. For true partnership, we needed to build trust and relationship early. So we engaged our elementary secretaries in trauma-informed training, as they are the heart of the schools and a typical first point of contact for families. During this training, we brought in a panel of current and incoming kinder parents to speak to their experiences, their hopes and wonderings about starting their child in kindergarten, and we learned so much. This is something we were glad to have started small, and we really look forward to expanding. Authentic voice was central. We engaged our early learning community to identify gaps in district support and collaboratively define what successful transitions should look like. Listening also strengthened that relationship. So to better understand the kinder enrollment experience, we surveyed our families and learned that they needed more flexible, accessible support. In response, we provided push and support by attending Head Start conferences to help families enroll their kinder. And we host after-hours drop-in enrollment sessions to connect with families earlier, before August. We also moved our kinder orientation from March to May, as it felt more relevant and we were able to reach more families as this timeline worked better. These school-based orientation events now include structures for what Nadra discussed briefly of the 3 directions of communication: school to family, sharing key information, which is very typical; family to school, we gathered hopes and concerns of our families through a feedback protocol during orientation; and then family to family. We needed to create space for parents to connect and share their experiences together. They're going to be together for the next 13 years. So this helped rebuild the sense of school community, something that both families and staff had felt was diminished really since the pandemic. Some of our resources and tools, we wanted to continue centering families in all of our orientation resources, covering topics like routines, independence, emotional support for kids and their adults, and those pickup and drop off processes that we heard from our parent panel as, one of those worries. All of this, of course, provided bilingually. Each school received a customizable kindergarten social story template with funding secured for color printing. And these stories help children and caregivers get familiar with the staff, routines, and the school environment, really building excitement and that sense of belonging. To ensure educators are ready for all learners, we developed mini lessons aligned with the Oregon Early Learning Guidelines, designed with teacher input. Each 10-minute mini lesson uses developmentally appropriate practices and incorporates movement, participation, and follows a predictable brain-friendly structure with sentence stems to ensure the lessons are easy for teachers to deliver and easy for kids to take in. Lessons teach essential school readiness skills in context. For example, a lesson on turn taking is embedded in a math game, connecting directly to our Bridges curriculum. These skills help all kids access learning and build peer relationships in meaningful ways. By focusing on what we can influence, which Nadra discussed, and equipping schools to be ready for kids, we aim to close the opportunity gaps and ensure every child starts school with the confidence and joy of kindergarten. When skills are taught explicitly, all kids benefit. Some are affirmed, others are empowered, and the classroom community is strengthened. As far as practices, we realized we needed clear, visually calming, and accessible communication to ensure buy-in from our teachers and leadership. They also filter so much trauma and experience. So we created an at-a-glance structure with very organized folders and links, giving staff and admins easy access to all of our resources. We hope next year to expand communication of many of these resources directly to our early learning providers, which I heard from some of our other panelists. They're really engaged in that phase already. We've done kinder visits, and this year every preschooler in our internal programs visited the kindergarten they'll attend. They experienced a lesson, they completed a scavenger hunt to meet key staff and explore the school, and they left with a school shirt, a photo by the school sign, and that kinder social story. Well, this is not a new idea. This inclusive hands-on experience helped children start seeing themselves as kindergartners, and they loved it. So as we reflect and plan forward, we began this year by strengthening the foundational practices already in place and focus on doing these things better. Starting on a small scale with our internal early learning programs, we tested those strategies, such as ensuring every preschooler participated in a kinder visit and received the social story, reaching 100% kindergarten enrollment by June for our internal programs, promoting enrollment in summer programs like Kids in Transition to School, and sharing pre-K transition reports with developmental assessments and student photos to keep each child centered as a whole person, not just a name or a data point. We're also preparing for future improvements, such as transitioning to online enrollment to further streamline access for families, partnering with community preschool programs to expand, what we've tested in our internal programs. This is ongoing. This takes time, and we really look forward for this as a first step toward our broader goals and vision as we also prepare to welcome a new superintendent in July. The work is big.
Thanks, Greta. Really great also to have a former kindergarten teacher sharing this. And I want to give a big shout out and thank you to all the panelists for providing such substantive, passionate examples and information for today's session. I see we now have the poll, which I know the campaign takes very seriously in informing these webinars. So please take a moment.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to echo that. If you could fill out our poll, that would be fantastic. Fortunately and unfortunately, this has been such a rock star panel that we're near the end of time. But if folks all want to come back on really quickly, I figured kind of a good ending question just as we wrap up the conversation. We've got about 4 minutes, but I wanted to leave it open to all of you to see if there was anything else that you thought of or anything else that you wanted to share with our more than 200 folks who are still listening in right as we're right up to the end of our conversation. So I kick it over to all of you. Is there anything else that, you would recommend to folks as they're considering this work or really wanting to get engaged? Are there any, additional resources or points that you want to make before folks hop off? And we can just go around really quickly. I'll start with David since you were the first to kick us off, and we'll just go around really quickly.
Thank you, Sierra. Really a pleasure to hear from all the panelists. And it was inspiring for me to learn about what's happening in other communities. And Deirdre, I love the connection with housing. That's something that we're really eager to pursue further and have been talking to some of our communities about that. So thanks again, Sierra and Swati, for pulling together such a wonderful panel.
Sounds great. Thank you. And Heidi, is there anything else on your mind?
Yeah, ditto. What an incredible group. I guess I would just say don't forget your friendly primary care teams down the street. They really want to partner with you. They just may not know how. So reaching out and just a casual conversation sometimes can have really rich reward. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Jennifer, anything from you?
Just a rock star panel. I learned a lot, and I do see questions in the chat around the readiness conversation. And I would just underline kind of what Heidi said and what others have said, that readiness is about preparing community, preparing family, but then also reassuring families that we'll be ready for your child no matter what. And that we can help build their skills, but there are still things that you can do before kindergarten to pour in and build skills for your children.
Definitely. Thank you. And Deirdre, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just echo an incredible panel. You all were amazing. And Swati, thank you for leading us through it. And just a huge shout out to Chattanooga. I'm looking at this 2.0 situation. It is incredible, incredible. I meet with our superintendent today of Des Moines Public Schools. So I'm going to talk about Chattanooga 2.0.
There we go. And hopefully others on our webinar will be doing the same. And then our folks from Eugene, if either of you want to hop in, that would be great to round us off.
Yeah, thank you all. I really learned a lot. Some of the resources that were shared, I'm like, I love that. I'm gonna go look at it. I want everybody to know that Greta and I are open to answering any questions. I know some surfaced in the chat that we didn't have a chance to answer. So we're open. We can, Sierra can share our email, and we're happy to sit with you and talk with you. Today, we just scratched the surface of the many things that we tackled this year and for the past 3 years. So feel free to contact us and we'll schedule something with you. Greta?
Just very honored to be part of this amazing panel. I've learned so much as a participant. So thank you for the invite, and a shout out to the Children's Institute for connecting us to Campaign for Grade Level Reading and the work they'd helped to elevate through their Early Learning and Early School Success Academy.
All righty, thank you. And Swati, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity as well. Is there anything on your
Just
mind?
gratitude for this work that's going on, and just underscoring how important it is that we just get as many people on this page as possible to support. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you all. This was such a beautiful way to use our last 5 minutes, so I really appreciate that. I hope you've all seen the chat and all of the support and the kindness and the excitement to dig into resources. As a reminder for our attendees, you will be receiving the webinar recording, the slide deck, the bios, every single resource that was put in the chat, and then some probably. So keep an eye on that email that will come later this week on Friday. And just as a reminder, we have some great upcoming webinars. Later this afternoon, we will be continuing the conversation on EdTech and ensuring universal access to the internet. That'll be at 3 p.m., so in just about an hour. On June 10th next week, we have an exciting doubleheader with a Crucible of Practice Salon looking at rural communities, and another session as part of our Children as Collateral Damage series at 3 p.m., this time looking at SNAP's far-reaching benefits for children. And on June 17th, another doubleheader. We only have one session listed here, but we'll be starting off with a funder to funder conversation at 12:30 and a usual webinar in our 3 p.m. time slot. So thank you so much again to everyone. Sorry for the extra minute that we went over, but really, really appreciate hearing from every single person on this panel and hearing from all of you in the chat box as well. So thank you again. I hope you can join us and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you all.